Welcome to the show, Tristan. And today
Hi,
we
Dan.
have with us Mr. Tristan Gillen from Growth Division. And the reason I invited Tristan on board today is because he's running a growth agency for B2b SaaS companies. Or is it what, B2B tech companies in general?
Yeah, I mean, we do actually a bit of B2C, a bit of B2B, but yeah, like B2B is definitely one of our specializations,
Yeah.
and SaaS
Okay.
is.
So,
So
people,
yeah,
what you have to understand is Tristan and company are huge on experimentation and growth experiments, which is what I love about their work. They have this very structured approach to growing companies, which I want you guys to benefit from. So, again, welcome, Tristan, and please say a few words about your company and what you
thanks, Dan.
guys
Yeah,
are up
no,
to.
thanks for having me. It's really great to be on. Yeah, no, I mean, as Dan said, kind of one of our main assets as a company is helping startups grow through this experimentation process, and kind of the whole process that we built at Growth Division was born out of a startup that I previously helped found and run a few years ago, which was like a mobile pre-order and payment app, which basically allowed people to order ahead at coffee shops, lunch spots, and bars to beat the queue and earn loyalty rewards. And kind of through the process of building that company, this was kind of 5 or 6 years ago, we'd kind of obviously identified the fact that you need to find those scalable channels to market for your business, and it's a really hard thing to do, right? And you can't just kind of land on a strategy and hope it works. You've got to experiment within your marketing channels, and you've really got to test things out.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Exactly.
just over the course of kind of running the business, we kind of like built up a few ways of experimenting, and now we've kind of built this into a bit of an
Yeah.
agency.
I love that story. Like in a way, it's pretty typical that's how a lot of agencies start. That you work either for yourself or some other company, and you're like, "Hey, I get this marketing thing. Like, I love to do this. I want to do this more." And then sometimes you fall in love with marketing so much that it motivates you more than the company or the product which you were supposed to be promoting. So that's why you switched to the agency side. So I guess that's what happened with you.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Like, I mean, it was actually with my other co-founder here at Growth Division, Tom. So we were running the business for a few years together. Kind of grew it to a reasonable size, and kind of went through that startup journey of raising money and kind of growing the business across various parts of the UK. But it ended up that we ended up selling the business actually, and that gave us an opportunity to start to delve into other stuff. And we started doing some marketing consultancy, and eventually kind of ended up building Growth Division out as a brand and
Right,
agency.
right. So how many companies do you work with?
Currently, I think we've got nearly 40 different startups on our books, kind of ranging from like the small startups who are just kind of initially validating their kind of product and trying to understand their initial go-to-market strategy, all the way through to kind of Series A and B
Hmm.
startups where we're basically working as their growth team. So it's quite a good variety, and yeah, it's good fun.
Right. Okay. And what are some of the results that you're most proud of with clients?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess our kind of core value proposition is to help find and validate specific channels to market. So a startup actually brings us in to help kind of validate a specific channel to market, and we utilize this framework called the Bullseye Framework. You might have heard of it before. It's actually based off a book called
Yeah,
Traction.
that was going to be my next question because it's a super
Yeah,
interesting framework and it seems very thorough.
yeah.
And I really hope that we can get into the Bullseye framework this time.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, to outline kind of it in a high level, there's kind of 20 different growth channels you can choose to grow your business. So obviously that's quite a big, a large number of options. And the difficulty is when you're a startup and you're just starting out, is how can you know which of these 20 channels are going to be the most effective ones to take your startup to market. So you kind of, what we help startups do is build this initial hypothesized go-to-market strategy. So we select between 4 and 6 of the channels out of 20 that we believe have the biggest potential to hit their growth targets, and then we basically bring in experts to run those channels and run the experiments within those channels, and therefore validating the channels to market. So you mentioned what's the kind of some of the most successful experiments we run. Actually, ultimately, it's about kind of finding those scalable channels to market. So I suppose for one of our clients that we're working with at the moment, they're called Adland. They're a kind of like a right move. So somewhere where you go and find property on a marketplace, but this is actually a land marketplace, so you can go and buy land on this marketplace.
Right.
And basically we kind of started out with about 5 or 6 different channels to market. We brought in experts. We started running experiments within each of the channels. After about 3 months, we realized, there were a couple of channels that weren't working so well, so we kind of stopped investing in those channels. And we'd actually found, search engine marketing, so paid for Google ads, to be one that was really effective. We were seeing 26.5% decreases in their cost per acquisition each month. And eventually got to a point where we were underneath their kind of targeted cost per acquisition within that channel by 50%. So we'd validated that as a channel to market and ended up, we were spending like 30K plus per month within that channel. And that is kind of proving itself as a scalable channel to market. So now they know that they can invest X amount per month in that channel, and they end up with X amount in return in that channel. So I suppose it's that process of kind of starting with a broad number of channels and whittling them down and focusing and honing in your spend in the channels where you're seeing stuff working. And I suppose that's one example where we quite quickly found and validated a scalable channel to market.
Awesome. Okay, so tell us about the Bullseye Framework. And just for you guys who are watching or listening, you might want to actually watch this episode, because Tristan actually has a little bit of a show and tell ready for us, because he's gonna like whip out that PowerPoint or that website, and he's gonna show us the framework for real in its visual and graphical form. So
yeah, I'll just put it up actually, because it does help when you start to visualize it. So
love it.
This is the Bullseye, right? So you've got these 20 different kind of growth channels you can use to grow your business. So these range from like some more organic based channels such as
you got SEO, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You even have offline. I love it that you have offline in there, because it's always been part of the picture to a smaller or greater extent, but it's always been part of the picture in marketing.
Yeah. For sure. And like lots of kind of agencies or lots of businesses now just naturally gravitate towards the digital. And the thing is, digital is actually becoming more difficult to compete in many of the more traditional digital channels, including, Google ads. Like I think there's a 27% year-on-year increase in the cost per click on Google ads. So every year it's becoming more expensive to advertise on Google. So you need to be thinking a bit more innovatively around what channels to market you're choosing. And offline ads is an interesting one. So for some clients, we use things like handwritten letters.
Exactly.
In the B2b prospecting process.
Exactly.
So one of the first touch points is like we send a handwritten letter to the prospect, and then we follow up with like digital channels such as email marketing and LinkedIn outreach and LinkedIn ads. So it's thinking about these channels, not just the digital ones, but also the offline ones, and how you can kind of build that sales funnel and utilize each of these different channels in conjunction with each other. So I think that's the use of this framework, is that it makes sure that you think of all of the options and not just kind of pigeonhole yourselves into
So for everybody listening, would you agree with this, Tristan, that if you execute a good direct mail campaign online, meaning an email campaign, then these days you're lucky to get upwards of 20% in open rate. But the usual numbers are probably, depending on how warm your list is and how good a relationship you have with your list, the typical number is more around 10 to 12%. Now, the response rate, or let alone the click-through rate, is much, much lower. So if you're going for direct response, as in the prospect actually answering your emails or doing something that you want, you're actually looking at around 1 or 2% most. Now, with direct mail, when you send it through snail mail in the post, people are so surprised to get anything from the post these days that your open rate is going to be 100% guaranteed, pretty much. And if you personalize it right and you actually have something meaningful or something personal and even something humorous to say, the response rate is going to be near 100%. Does that about cover your experience, or how are you guys with these results?
I mean, I think you're right. That like digital, it's like difficult to get good levels of response through, and this is just a way to stand out, because lots of people are kind of sending lots of cold emails, and I'm sure lots of people get a lot of rubbish in their inbox every day from people emailing cold, and you can see a lot of bad practices done kind of through digital email. But actually, through sending this offline handwritten letters, it can be a great way to just stand out. Now, the caveat is obviously it can be really difficult to actually get that person's address, which can be kind of a caveat and make it difficult. So I always find that, like with any sort of outreach campaign, whether it's online or offline, it's the quality of data you put into the top of the funnel that is the biggest. Yeah, is the biggest kind of factor
So
as to
true.
what interest rate you
Yeah,
get.
for that reason, for that exact same reason, what we often do is, okay, we never run like fully offline campaigns. It's always integrated, meaning it like offline is a part of the mix. So it's usually multi-channel. But what we do, because of what you just said, that it can be tricky to get the person's address. So once you get their, I don't know, company's address from LinkedIn or whatever database you use, you send them a note, something along the lines of, hey, I'm about to send you something cool in the post, and I want to make sure that this address is where you can be found. And even if that is a cold message or a semi-cold message, like that's something that grabs attention, and that'll usually get a response.
Yeah, for sure. And I think
and
that's
you can
really,
validate it.
yeah, I think that's really important part actually. Before we've used like cold calling as a way to validate the person's address as well. So again, it's just integrating the different channels into this kind of nice customer journey where you can optimize conversions throughout.
Yeah, awesome. So I think like you've got the whole shipload of of marketing channels and techniques and growth avenues. You've got viral marketing and engineering is marketing. Tell us about that. What's engineering is marketing?
Yeah, that's the kind of interesting one. So that's basically utilizing some sort of software, or like it could be like a pricing calculator, for instance, on your website to drive and generate leads through. So an example that I absolutely love is HubSpot. They have this email signature creator. So HubSpot is obviously a CRM system.
Yes.
They're trying to target small business owners. And if you type into Google email signature creator, HubSpot's one of the top listings on Google. And of course, you've just created your new domain as a business owner. You've just created your email. You want a nice signature. So that's what you do. You go to Google. You go through HubSpot's email signature creator tool, you create your signature, and then, in order to get the signature, you put your email in, and then they market to you through email marketing for weeks afterwards, telling you to get HubSpot CRM. And, it's a free tool to use, but they've captured you at that right point in your kind of buyer journey as well. So you're a new business owner, you're thinking about CRMs, you're thinking about new emails, new assets, new business processes. And, HubSpot can therefore market to you, and they've captured you at exactly the right moment. Other examples might be pricing calculators, return on investment calculators, that sort of thing as well. Generally, it's about capturing an email and then marketing to that person afterwards, really.
Yeah, right on. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so you've got these 19 different channels or avenues, and then you start by formulating a hypothesis. Or do you test all of them, or do you just test some of them with your hypothesis?
Yeah, so I think this is like one of the most difficult parts of putting this together is, so you've got the 20 options, and what we normally recommend is you narrow them down to between 4 and 6 channels you believe have the potential to hit your growth targets over the coming few months. And basically putting together really the best channel mix that you think is going to work for you. And once you've done that, that's obviously just hypothetical, right? You might have run some marketing experiments in the past that kind of leads you into certain channels. So you might have run some direct outreach campaigns that make you think that's a good channel. But a lot of the time it's based on kind of hypotheticals and kind of finger in the air best guesses. So
gotcha.
The next step of the bullseye is really very important as well. Is you've made that initial hypothesized channel mix, then you've got to go and test them. You've got to go and test these channels to market. And I suppose this is kind of the next step in our process, a growth division, which will be basically to run these growth experiments. So we've actually built this kind of growth experimentation tool that basically allows us to run these growth experiments and
breezy growth stack.
Yes. So, I mean, actually, you might be interested if I just take you through kind of how we run.
Definitely.
So we actually ended up trying to find a tool that did the job for us in terms of like actually setting hypotheses and running effective growth experiments. And we just couldn't find one. So we've actually built our own tool that we use internally at Growth Division. one day we do want to kind of make it a publicly available tool, but at the moment we're kind of like MVPing it ourselves and testing it out.
Right.
But the idea of a good growth experiment is that you kind of build this experiment against specific kind of hypotheses that you're setting. So, if in this example, we might be saying like, test handwritten letters or whatever. And then that has to align to a specific objective. So in this case, it might be we want to hit 25 MQLs a month, and this is going to help us achieve that. Then you need to write down a hypothesis. So why do you think this experiment is going to be one that's an effective one? Why do you think it's going to work? And then you need to think about, okay, what is it actually affecting in terms of the metric that is going to change? So in the case of handwritten letters, it might be like,
so you force yourself to already think about the outcome in terms of KPIs or OKRs.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, what metric are you trying to make better? Is it reply rates on an outreach campaign? So you set, importantly, what success looks like. So what if you run this experiment and you actually get it to that point? What does success look like? So maybe at the moment you're on 20% replies, but if you improve it to 30, then this is a successful experiment, and it's one that you should run again. And then you also think about so we often come up with lots of experimentation ideas as a growth team. So the way that we prioritize which experiments we want to work is through a framework called the ICE framework, which is basically impact, confidence, and ease. So it's like, what sort of impact will this have on my business out of 10? So we could say, okay, maybe an 8 out of 10, it would be quite high impact. It will improve my reply rates, it will improve my lead generation rate.
Okay.
How confident are you? Maybe I'm not that confident because I've never done it before, potentially.
So the probability is what you put there. Yeah, the ease of implementation. Yeah, obviously, is it a pain in the ass or does it go like a breeze?
Exactly, and maybe you put a 6 there. And then basically what that does is it averages those out, and then you can kind of prioritize the highest impact and lowest ease easiest experiments, and then you can actually see which ones you should.
Okay, and then you've got the owner, the start date, end date, and you choose the channel. I guess you can probably choose more.
Yeah, so you can choose, so this might be the offline.
So you choose all the channels which you were looking to test out of the 19 or 20. Exactly. Unconventional PR, yeah.
Yes. Okay, and then basically you save that, and then you can come back to it and say, okay, this was actually the result of it. And I think that coming back to it again is a lot of the time businesses kind of they say they're running growth experiments, but they don't firstly set these what does success look like? Why are you running it?
Exactly. That's how I used to do it.
They don't actually come back and see whether it worked or not. So
that's how I used to do it, to be honest. Back in the day, I would have 27 ideas, and out of the 27, I would test 25, and then I would look at the results of 2 and not learn anything from the rest, which just looked like failures and total flunks. But I'm definitely more methodical in my approach now. But I love this, how this forces you to be on point, and it keeps you accountable with your experiments. Okay, so you have this dashboard where I'm assuming you can look at all of your running experiments at one glance.
Exactly. So you've basically got kind of for each channel we're running. So there's search engine marketing, there's direct outreach channel, there's a content channel, there's an SEO channel. Then we basically are pulling through all of the experiments that we're running within each channel into here. So for instance, let's have a look at this. So, just a website that has startup jobs on as a lead source. And you can see here what the experiment looks like. So, what the variable metric is, what we're trying to achieve, what channel it's associated with, who owns it, the start and end date. And then once the experiment is finished, we put the results in, and then that kind of goes into this bank of experiments where we've got experiments that have worked well in the past and experiments that haven't worked in the past, and that just means that we don't end up repeating experiments time and time again with ones that don't work. So it's good to just have this stored place, and every month all of our experts kind of get together and basically kind of talk the rest of the growth team through what experiments they've been running and what the successes look like. And again, I think that kind of like monthly cadence of reporting back to
I
everyone
love
keeps
that.
everyone
I
accountable
love that.
to
So
running
this becomes part of your core and standard reporting process.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
So
Love it.
it's not just like, okay, it's the end of the month.
Yeah.
What do
What
we
did you do?
what do we do? Yeah, so this is like diving into the actual kind of what's been
Yes.
happening, why it's happening, and what's worked and what hasn't worked.
Great, great. Super awesome. I love
So
it.
yeah, I think that kind of experimentation process is something that has taken us quite a few years to put together, but it's now in a good place. And I think really just that process and that way of thinking about experimentation is something that's really important. I think
It is.
for marketers and business owners.
Okay. And what's your opinion about channels and experiments where you can't really quantify results, or at least not very early? So, demand generation on social channels would be one such example, because it's real tough to assign a specific KPI to those. Usually, what people end up doing is looking at the increases in revenue. So, like, let's say they get active in demand generation on social channels, and then they look at stuff they should measure is a qualified pipeline, increase in revenue, maybe the shortening of the sales cycle. So all of the things that a better demand generation program can result in. Um, how would you approach something like that? So if I wanted to say, okay, I'm not doing any content marketing on LinkedIn or any social marketing, and I want to do an experiment. Obviously, it's going to take ages because this sort of stuff doesn't result in anything in in under a few months, and then the results or the actual measurable results come even later. So, would this framework be adequate for that, or is it just for like shorter experiments?
No, yeah, it's definitely more of a challenge when you don't have that quantifiable or immediate result to judge something by. I think just when you're building the experiment in the first place, you just need to be conscious of that. So you might actually put the experiment end date to be in 6 months' time, and it might be like a proxy data point, like like you said, an increase in kind of traffic to the blog, or an increased,
Right, right.
a decrease in our sales cycle
Yeah.
as the key
So,
success
yeah,
metric.
for
And
example,
so
direct traffic to the website is one such metric, which is sort of quantifiable and is set to be the
yeah,
direct result of good content marketing and good demand generation.
yeah,
So direct
exactly.
traffic in Google Analytics, that's yeah, that could be an indicator, definitely.
Yeah, there's normally like proxy metrics that you can kind of associate things with. Another example is like PR. A lot of people say it's just not possible to really judge the
Yeah,
success of PR very effectively. But again, what you can do is say, look at your traffic sources on Google Analytics, and you can see, where the traffic's come from. And if there's a PR article, you'll be able to see your traffic source as that PR article. So you can see the actual impact on your site traffic, and use that as a kind of proxy for the success of it. You might not be able to track that all the way through to a closed sale. You might be if you've got your attribution set up correctly, but yeah, I mean, attribution is a whole other thing and difficult
yeah,
to
that's
get right a lot of the time. But yeah, I think you need to have that kind of like ideal metric that you can track always with associated
yeah,
with an experiment. Yeah.
got you. Awesome. Okay, so as far as executing these experiments, do you work in sprints, or do you have a go-to methodology that you found to be successful?
Yeah, so again, just we kind of continue the Bullseye methodology. So once we've built that initial 4 to 6 channel mix, we basically run experiments generally for about 3 months within the channel. And after 3 months, we basically can start to see some green shoots in channels. We might see some channels like, absolutely being validated after 3 months. Some channels you might not have got enough data, or you might not have given it enough chance. So after 3 months, it's kind of that point where you're quite comfortable to start to make decisions in terms of, okay, that channel's not working. Let's remove it from our channel mix and maybe start to test and reallocate that budget into another channel. So it's really a case of kind of working in like 3 month sprints, basically, where we're saying, okay, these channels worked, and then moving to the next 3 months and testing other channels, or bringing in more channels, or taking out channels. It's basically that 3 month assessment, which is kind of the cadence of reporting which we generally work to.
Right. That's awesome. Okay. So let me try to summarize what I learned today and then you tell me where I'm off. Okay. So, what I really love about your methodology and your approach is that it systemizes what marketing and growth should be about in the long run, meaning, in reality, what you want a marketing team to do forever is to keep on experimenting and find new channels that work. And then once you find a channel, you want to scale it. You want to make the most out of it. And then when you've made the most out of it, you want to keep it running. And then with your excess resources, you want to find something new. So it's like constant experimentation. And most teams do this haphazardly. So they're just like, okay, let's look for something. Okay, let's test it. And then they end up not even finishing tests. What your methodology makes people do, makes marketing teams do, is to like be diligent about testing, documenting hypotheses, measurement, feedback, and everything else. And that's what I love about it. Is that sort of the gist of it?
Yeah, I think spot on. I think these are like the core pillars of what we're trying to achieve as an agency, which is to try and bring these things back into marketing and to make things more rigorous,
Yes.
and make these approaches more rigorous. So yeah, definitely. I suppose there's one part that like we haven't spoken about yet, which is like another core belief of ours at Growth Division, which is the use of experts to actually execute on experiments and to run the experiments, because quite a lot of the time what we see is kind of what we term as generalist marketers, who are kind of multi-channel marketers, but they're not specifically skilled at any one channel maybe. So they might do a bit of blogging, they might do a bit of paid something, they might do a bit of SEO, they might do a bit of digital PR, they might do a bit of email marketing. But the problem we see with these kind of marketers when they're running the experiments is a lot of the time they're kind of minds everywhere, and they're not very kind of focused on what works and what doesn't work within each of the channels, and they're not specifically skilled at any of the channels. So
Yeah.
again, what we see with these types of setups is a lot of wasted marketing spend. So what?
But I love those marketers. So as a company, as a brand, I think you'd be wise to hire a generalist marketer or a T-shaped marketer, as they say. Like they have general knowledge, general but shallow knowledge over a lot of things, and then depth in one domain or maybe two domains. I think they make awesome marketers, but you just have to know the limitations of that. And then you have to know when to bring in the experts, when to hire like somebody you haven't been doing ABM, and sure they could figure it out because they're smart people and they could start DIYing ABM together or any growth experiment together. But what's the point in the end? DIYing stuff always ends up costing more. So I only now resort to DIY in a hobby, for example, building a treehouse. Of course, an expert would be faster and better, and the treehouse wouldn't fall off the tree, but it's fun. But for anything related to business, I go the fastest way and the highest expertise way, which is usually the most money up front, but the best investment over the medium and long term.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head where you say like they're great assets to have, but you need to know their limitations. So, if they are working as kind of a strategist across multiple channels, that's great. But if they're executing on all of the channels and purely responsible for each of the channels, that's when it can get a bit messy.
Yeah, they're going to get overwhelmed, and
Yeah,
and they're going to leave
yeah,
your company because
yeah.
they'll just get overwhelmed because you can't do it. Marketing has gotten so deep and so specific and so wide and in so many domains that it's impossible to like.
Yeah,
And it's not even
exactly.
advisable to try to be the best at everything because you just can't be.
Yeah, and that the problem is I often do see kind of the job or the job descriptions of marketers, especially in the kind of startup small business world, where there are limited marketing budgets, and you'll see that the job description requires that person to have like SEO experience, paid experience, email experience, PR experience, like CRM management experience, and that having all of those skills is just like not really possible. And if you do think you're an expert, all of them, you're probably lying to yourself. These kind of job adverts kind of anger me a little bit because it's just like not realistic. And for me, I see the more effective way of executing on a strategy is to basically bring in kind of freelance experts who are part-time, who can kind of manage a specific channel and stay very focused within that channel. And again, yeah, so that's kind of like the third part of Growth Division's kind of core pillars of what we add as value, is that we have this community of expert channel specific marketers who we basically bring in to form custom growth teams for the businesses we work with.
Yeah. Just one addition to bringing on freelancers. If you're going to work with freelancers, you'll need at least a fractional CMO, because in order to manage freelancers, you've got to know what you're doing. And oftentimes the CEO or some head of sales tries to be the one who manage marketing freelancers, and it never works out to be a pretty ending. Usually, those companies usually end up hating agencies and freelancers in general, because you need somebody to, and that's where generalist marketers can come in. If you have a generalist marketer who's also a good project manager, then they can coordinate agencies and freelancers.
That's exactly kind of our structure at Growth Division, is to have that generalist marketer who we call a growth strategist, who's the T-shaped marketer, and they're the ones kind of managing all of these freelancers, because you do need someone to pull the glue together. And that's the thing with this growth experimentation process that I've just kind of ran you through. It kind of falls apart if there's not that person bringing everyone together and keeping everyone accountable and putting the overall strategy in the right direction. So you do need that person, that fractional CMO, as you say, in place.
Awesome. This has been awesome. Like I love this conversation. I think people can get a lot out of it, especially if you're looking to hire and grow and expand your marketing activities and growth activities. Is there anything I should have asked you, or that you wanted me to ask you?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I think we've covered most of it. I think, it's a good question. But I think we've covered a lot of the kind of key areas that I wanted to go through. I think we checked most boxes there.
Okay, cool. Now, if you want, we can turn tables and you get to ask me a question.
Okay. I didn't really come prepared with the question, but
that's
okay. I mean, I guess within B2B, what are you seeing as the kind of ultimate channel mix for the people that you're working with? Like, what would you, if you didn't really have too much of a marketing budget restraint, what would be kind of that ultimate like B2B channel mix that you put together?
Okay, well, it depends. If you have a mature marketing organization, that I would audit what you're doing and see what works, and then spend more money where it's been proven to work and it's been proven to return an investment. If not, if you don't have a mature marketing organization and you've just been fiddling with marketing, then obviously we would first do market research, like talk to existing customers or prospects, and then come up with a strategy. Like, that's the general thing. But if you would want me to go to Vegas and then like put money on a channel just by guessing and then hoping that it makes a return, if that's your question, then what I'm seeing is kicking ass on top of funnel content. So entertaining and educational content. And then when I say content, it means creating good content and distributing it right. So social media, on paid channels. So building a bond with good content, it just kicks butt. And then once you build a good relationship, you're able to execute. And in B2B, it's usually webinars or alternatives thereof, where you're able to activate the audience and then build a deeper relationship that way. So if I had to make a guess, then that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, content is hugely important. Do you see, because you mentioned it's kind of quite top of the funnel brand awareness, but do you also find it's kind of like an important touch point lower down the funnel?
Oh,
because,
yeah.
Because I was speaking to someone who runs a podcast actually focused on like targeting startup founders, and what did he say? He said, if someone in their pipeline has touched one of their podcasts, like just listen to even one, they know that person has a 70% chance of closing really quickly.
Wow.
So they've just done this analysis into their data that, if someone's just even heard the podcast just once, they don't have to be a regular listener. The conversion on those deals in their pipeline are just made much, much quicker. So actually, I think in terms of conversions lower down the funnel, it's also pretty effective to have high quality content.
Yes, yes, yes. By the way, when we start with content, what we usually do is look at your bottom of the funnel content. So the stuff that's closest to the sale, because
Mm.
that's where you tend to get the most impact. But what we find with several clients is that they tell us, like, our bottom of the funnel content, meaning our pitch deck, is okay. Sure, it could be made better, but the bottleneck is at the top of the funnel. So if so companies tend to miss out on a lot of opportunity because the messaging on their website is off, or they have a weak presence on LinkedIn, and so there they just like churning a lot of opportunity right at the top of the funnel. So in those cases, we go in everywhere, but
Yeah.
we prioritize top of funnel content that way. Website,
Yeah.
messaging, positioning.
I think that's really, yeah, a sensible way of doing it, actually, because like otherwise you know the content possibilities are almost endless, aren't they? So actually by focusing on what's happening right at the bottom of the funnel, you can kind of like flip it on its head a little bit and bring relevant content to the top of the funnel. It's a clever way of doing it.
Yeah,